If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to move mountains, but I do not have love, then I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, but then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. The greatest of these is love. May these words of my mouth, and may the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, for it is you and you alone who is our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Have you ever experienced this? You have a favorite song that you really enjoy, and you like it so much that you listen to it over and over and over again, until all of a sudden you realize you don't really like that song anymore because you've listened to it too much. Has anybody else experienced this? Maybe not. I have. I've experienced that with songs. And I have also experienced that with Bible verses. Bible verses that were favorites of mine that just because they were so often repeated, I don't know, they just start to lose some of that thing that made them special. And often it's because the text itself is taken out of context. You know, we just had one of these last Sunday with Micah 6, chapter 8. But what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God? That is a beautiful text, right? Beautiful. And because it's so beautiful, it's been so often repeated. And not only that, but if you read it in the context of all of Micah, right, the whole text of the book of the prophet of Micah is basically, you are doing bad and God is going to destroy you. You are doing bad and God is going to destroy you. If you don't quit doing bad, God is going to destroy you. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. This text from 1 Corinthians 13 is another of these Bible verses that I have heard so many times and often taken out of context. because usually when I hear 1 Corinthians 13, I am at a wedding. It's a wedding, right? This is so common in weddings. In fact, in the movie Wedding Crashers, I don't know if you've seen the movie Wedding Crashers, but there's if you haven't seen it, there's two characters played by Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn, and what they do is every weekend they go out and crash weddings in order to pick up girls at these weddings. And there's a scene in the movie Wedding Crashers where they're sitting there in the church, and it's come time for the reading of the scripture. And Owen Wilson leans over to Vince Vaughn and says, $20, says 1 Corinthians. To which Vince Vaughn replies, double or nothing, Colossians 3:12. And the bride's sister steps up to the lectern and begins to read, saying, and now a reading from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Like Owen Wilson, my money would have been on 1 Corinthians 13 for a wedding scripture. It is almost certainly the most commonly used passage of scripture at wedding. And it's probably one of the most well-known passages in the entire Bible for that reason, right? You have all heard that passage of scripture before today, I guarantee it. Even if you're not a regular churchgoer, you've gone to enough weddings that you have heard it. And I understand why it's so popular. I mean, not only does the word love appear over and over and over again in the text, which is really nice if you're doing a wedding and wanting to set the scene for some romance. The language is Paul at his best. I mean, the language is so poetic, right? If I speak in the tongues of angels, but I do not have love, I am merely a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. That's poetry. Well done, Paul. But as a pastor who officiates weddings, I really don't like it when the couple chooses 1 Corinthians 13 for their wedding. Not only because almost every couple does, and it's very overused, but also because it is taken completely out of context. This portion of Paul's letter to the Corinthians comes at the end of a serious dressing down. A serious butt chewing is going on here. Paul has been chewing the Corinthians out for basically the entirety of his letter up until this point. You see, Paul has learned that this church that he planted, that he got started there in Corinth, that the members of this church are fighting amongst one another. They are not getting along. They are not living up to the example of Jesus. They're not living up to the example that Paul left them with. They have been constantly fighting and arguing and bickering. For one thing, as we saw last week in 1 Corinthians 12, right, people were arguing about which one of them was most important in the church. Whose job was the most important? Whose role made them the most important? To maybe skew the historical context a little bit, it would be like today if in our church council members were talking about the Sunday school teachers and being like, I appreciate what they do, but they don't do as much for the church as I do. Serving on the church council is so much more an important job than being a Sunday school teacher is. I mean, we're the leaders, we're the planners. And meanwhile, the Sunday school teachers are like, those people just sit there in meetings. They never do any actual work. We're the ones who are here with the kids doing the jobs. We're the important ones. You're like your turkey dinner cook saying, you know what? The people who plan this, they sure get off easy. I mean, they line up all the volunteers, and then they don't have to do anything. Meanwhile, the people who are planning the turkey dinner say, are you kidding me? You know what it takes to line up all these volunteers? We're the most important people in this process. Or on this first Sunday of the month when we celebrate communion, it's important to be aware that that was another thing that the Corinthians were fighting about. You see, the way that communion was served in the ancient church Unlike in our church where the kids are off baking the bread for our communion service right now, is the people would bring the bread and the wine, and then it wasn't just little symbolic pieces of bread. It was a meal. It was loaves and loaves of bread that everybody would sit down and eat together. They would share loaves of bread and bottles of wine, skins of wine, I suppose. But what was going on in Corinth is that the richest members of the church, they would show up with 3 loaves of bread and a couple of bottles of wine, and they'd break off a half of a loaf and say, here, this is for everyone. They'd pour out one little glass of wine and say, here, this is for everyone. And then the other 2.5 loaves and 2 bottles of wine and say, this is just mine. This is just for me. Paul gets word of this, right? That the rich Corinthians are bringing bread and wine for communion, but they are not sharing it with the poor who cannot afford to bring their own bread and wine. And Paul is getting reports about all of this bad behavior going on in the church in Corinth, and he has basically written them a letter saying, hey, knock it off. You guys are making me look bad in front of God. You need to do better. You need to be better. And in fact, that's how Paul ends 1 Corinthians chapter 12 with the words, I will show you a better way. I will show you a better way. And then he leads in to 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind. See, the 13th chapter of Corinthians, it is not a blessing of a marriage or a blessing of a loving relationship between 2 people. Rather, it is instructions for how to live in a community with one another. It's instructions on how to get along with people that you might not feel a whole lot of love for. It's an alternative vision that Paul is lifting up to this church. An alternative vision for people who are currently behaving less than lovingly with one another. In fact, the part of the text that we know best, right? Love is patient, love is kind. Usually when you're reading the wedding, that's where they start, not at the beginning of the chapter, but right there. Love is patient. In the Greek language, there are actually 2 different words for patient. One refers to being patient with your life circumstances, right? Like when you go to the DMV and there's a really, really long line that's not moving very quickly. But the Greek language has another word for patience that is specifically about being patient with other people who frustrate you. And it is that word for patience that is used in the text for 1 Corinthians 13. So maybe in that one case it is appropriate for a wedding. As beautiful as this text is, I'm concerned that because it is so heavily associated with weddings that it has lost some of its context as being instructions for how to be a church together. That's what it's about. It's about how to be a church together. So here is my attempt at reclaiming 1 Corinthians 13, of reframing it in that context. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Love is also radically vulnerable. Love is about opening up yourself, your real self, and letting others in. Love is about being honest with other people about who you are and what you want and what you need and how you feel. Love sometimes means saying out loud that you're unhappy with something that someone else has done to you. Love is vulnerable. Love is vulnerable. In fact, it is as vulnerable as an eternal and omnipotent God who comes to us wrapped in delicate, defenseless, vulnerable human flesh. Love is only really love if it is given unconditionally. It is only real love if it is given unconditionally. Otherwise, it's a commodity. As Jesus himself said in his Sermon on the Mount, it's easy to love people who are good to you. Anybody could do that. But the children of God are supposed to love the people who aren't good to you. To love the people that they find it hard to love. And it's important for me to say that that does not necessarily mean that you maintain a relationship with somebody who is abusive to you. But it does mean that you don't let them take your love away from you. And for that reason, love is hard. Love isn't easy. Love is hard. Real, unconditional love, that takes work. It takes work. Above all, sisters and brothers, love is work. Love is not an emotion. Love is an action. Love is not something you feel. Love is something that you do. Because over and over and over again in the Bible, God commands us that we love one another. We are supposed to love one another. Now, if I said to you, if you came in here this morning feeling really good, like you woke up on the right side of the bed, you're excited because your team is in the Super Bowl, right? You're having a good day. And I said to you, hey, be sad. You can't do that. You can't just flip a switch and immediately start feeling sad if you're feeling happy, and vice versa, right? If you came in here feeling blue, like you had gotten some bad news this morning, and you came into this church looking for shelter and refuge because you were feeling sad, and I said, hey, be happy right now. It doesn't work that way. Our emotions do not work that way. You cannot command somebody to feel a certain way. And yet the Bible commands us over and over to love one another. That's because love is not a feeling. It is an action. Love is not an emotion. It is an action. In fact, it says in one of the letters of John, let us not merely say that we love one another, but let us show our love by our actions. It can be little things. We can show love for one another in little things, like maybe Bruce putting on a Patriots shirt this morning. It's a way of showing some affection and kindness. I have a hard time believing that anybody who's not from New England is a Patriots fan. It can be little things that add up to something big. You know, when I was living in Esteline, we organized some interfaith dialogues between local Christian communities and Islamic communities. That's all it was sitting down and having conversations with one another, getting to know one another. But when you do that over and over again once a month, it starts to add up into something big. We've been doing the same thing as a conference, as the South Dakota Conference of the United Church of Christ. We've been having conversations with our Lakota sisters and brothers in what we're calling sacred conversations on race. To just talk about the relationship between white people of Lakota in this state, in our denomination, and in the church. It's just a conversation, but when you keep doing it, it adds up into something big. Demonstrations of love can be something big. I just heard from Paul this morning. He had told this story in our men's Bible study. He came to give me an update on it. Where it's about 7 years ago, Paul's son Stacy discovered that one of his neighbors was in some trouble. His neighbor was a veteran who had been wounded in an IED explosion in Afghanistan. And this left him with some physical and mental damage. That he was having then difficulty finding work, and he was having difficulty living in the home that he had always lived in because of his disability. It wasn't handicap accessible, and he was afraid that he was going to have to move. And so Paul's son Stacy started to just do little bits of work around the house to find ways that he could fix it up and do some work and make it more accessible. And then the local newspaper heard about this, and they ran a story about it. And before too long, donations started pouring in, financial donations and building materials. Volunteers started signing up, including our own Paul Nettinga, who at 70 years old was up on the roof of a house doing some work on this disabled veterans home. And together, this whole community came together around this veteran, Jerry, and they were able to build an addition onto the home and to make the home handicap accessible and to cover all of these expenses through donations and through volunteer hours. That's what love looks like. And the update to this story that Paul just shared with me this morning is that Jerry, as he went through rehab, was able to get to a point where he was able to go back to school. And he went back to school, to seminary, in fact. And he is starting his first call as a pastor here in the next few weeks. This disabled veteran is now serving in the church. Love is not an emotion, love is an action. Love is something that was due for other people. That's why God can command us to love one another. We don't have to feel it to act on it. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love. Never-ending, life-changing, always accepting, all-encompassing, radical, inclusive, revolutionary, uniting, subversive, justice-centered love. Valentine's Day candy has